Hey, welcome back to the channel. Look what I did. Let's talk about it. Yeah, I don't like that. Much better. Yes. Oh, yeah. Pro tip of the day when handling packages and delivering stuff to people's houses. Let's try not to grab the extremely sharp plastic straps that hold the box together because you may end up cutting something off. Anyway, let's jump into the unboxing. All right, guys, so today's install should be pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and do a tool breakdown and then we'll get after it. I've got my ratchet with a T40 Torx bit. This is going to be used to take the original roof rack off the TRD Pro. Before we do that, I'll actually talk a little bit more about some of the difficulties you may face, but we'll get there when we get there. Then we've got our 13mm wrench, and I've got a 13mm socket, and then I'm using the included Allen key that came with the kit. This is nice. One of my favorite things about this roof rack is the fact that there's no drilling required. It uses the OEM spots on the roof to actually install. So no drilling equals less pain in the butt. So overall win there. These guys took it a step further and they individually labeled each bag so you know exactly where this hardware belongs. So if you're like me and you like to lose a bunch of crap, then this is going to help you a lot. We've got our spacers, we've got our silicone, we've got our piece here to kind of keep the roof rack portion from touching the roof, so that way we don't get a bunch of scratching and scuffing and all sorts of craziness going on. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Doing some research online, I saw a couple reviews where people said that getting this roof rack off here was going to be difficult because they used red Loctite to get it mounted. A lot of people had to use torches to kind of warm up the bolts to loosen up the Loctite and then get the roof rack off. So I tested this earlier, but the actual bolts in mine, I was able to turn fairly easy. So no heating required for me on this time, but just be cognizant if you have a TRD Pro 5th gen and you're trying to take off the Pro roof rack, you may have to use a torch and some spacers to kind of heat these up and loosen them up, but we don't need to do that. All right, so first things first, we're going to use the T40 Torx bit to go ahead and get the roof rack off here. I'm standing on my rock sliders right now and supporting myself by grabbing onto this roof rack. You may need a ladder depending on whether you've got side steps or a pair of rock sliders or not, but just be careful. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing off here though. Like that. Don't fall off the roof. All right, guys, so I'm not gonna lie. You may still need some heat on these, but I'm doing it the hard way. You need to be very careful when doing this, not to strip these bolts out, because I've slipped a couple times already. So even pressure, slow turns, and it'll come out. It's taken me about 15 minutes or so to get 4 bolts out of this thing, all because of this red gunk that's right on here. If anything, at least you know red Loctite works pretty well. I'm going to keep struggling to get the rest of these off here. I'll see you when I get them all off. Go figure, right? I get every single bolt out of this thing, with the exception of the very first one right here. And there's something on the other side of this bolt in the headliner that is keeping me from spinning it. And while I've not completely stripped this thing out, it's pretty damn close. So I'm gonna have to get in here, probably remove the headliner a little bit to get under here and see what's going on.
All right, real quick. I had to pull the headliner down a little bit because I ended up knocking the roof rack plate down into the headliner. So if you're careful and you don't push these things too hard, they won't fall out. So this shouldn't be an issue for you.
So install is starting to get more complicated as we proceed. So we'll see what happens. You know how sometimes when you're working on things and things seem to be going just a little too smooth? Yeah, that scenario is applicable to this. So 45 minutes later, I can now take this TRD Pro roof rack off the 4Runner. I had to call in the big guns. Thankfully, I got a neighbor across the street that brought the old Ugga Chugga out, and we zipped this thing out of here. But anyway, let's get this thing off here and start putting the new one on. All right, so nice thing is the roof rack here is not very heavy at all, so I should be able to get this one off by myself, assuming I don't slip off the rock slider again. Anyway, let's get this thing off here. All right, so now that we got the roof rack off, we can get access to the bolt holes that are up here to put the new roof rack on. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit while I've got this area clear of the old roof rack, and then we're gonna get this thing on here. All right, so things have not been going very well. The silicone that came with the actual hardware blew out the back, got goop everywhere. And then this is how you actually put your brackets together when you're putting the mounting up into the mounting spots on the 4Runner. So we have our block at the bottom, we have our bolts through at the top of the washer. So I've got the first bracket put on here, and I've got this guy taped up because I'm going to fill the cracks around this with silicone and make sure no water leaks in. But yeah, be very careful when you're doing this so you don't drop that plate down into the 4Runner. All right, so now that we're getting ready to put the side pieces of the roof rack onto the actual brackets that we just mounted on, we're going to use this configuration right here of bolts. So each one of these will have a washer followed by a crush washer, and then on the back side you'll have your bolt and your washer on the other side. So we'll see what it looks like when we actually get them up here, but I went ahead and set these out here to make things a little bit easier. All right, guys, so got the bolt washer configuration set up here. Like I said, you'll install here with the bolt through with a flat washer, and then on the opposite side, there's gonna be a flat washer, a crush washer, and then you're gonna put the nut on. So we're gonna do this for all of the brackets that we just installed, and then we'll take a look at it. Now that we've got those mounted up, these are going to be the brackets that we use for the front of the 4Runner. This little piece right here is going to actually sit on the weather trim, and we'll bolt this into the roof rack. So let's take a look at what these look like. All right, guys, so now that we've got the front brackets put on here, again, you're gonna put them in with the same pattern of flat washer, crush washer, bolt or nut like we did before. But this time, what we need to do is get up under here, and we need to lift to create a little bit of tension, so that way this is all the way to the top, and then this piece will actually rest on the weather stripping. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. I recommend having a friend or a good neighbor that's willing to help you out when you're struggling to do this by yourself. But we wanna make sure, again, that this bracket is all the way down. These bolts are all the way to the top as much as it'll go. That way it creates that tension on here, which lets it rest on the weather stripping. All right, guys, quick update. It is day 2 of the roof rack install. I unfortunately ran out of time last night, so I was not able to finish this up. But yesterday we were able to get the side rails of the roof rack mounted on. Ran into a couple difficulties, but got it figured out, and there she is. So now we're gonna go ahead and focus on getting that front fairing put on, the rear fairing and the extrusions, and we'll wrap this install up. All right, guys, so in order to get the front fairing mounted to the extrusions, we need to open our front and rear fairing mounting kits. I found that I had some of my front fairing bolts and washers and nuts inside the rear fairing kit. Not a big deal because everything's there, but we want to take these little guys and we want to try to feed them into the ramp right here to actually mount this fairing to the extrusion. So the way that you do this is you'll bring this piece down here to the end and you'll just slide it in like that. I found that using the included Allen key to kind of finagle it back and forth made this a little bit easier. What we want to try to do is set these up so that they align with these holes that are in the fairing. So let's do that real quick and we'll set this on top so we can see how it's mocked up. All right, so there it is. As we can see in here, they're not quite lined up, but that's okay. What we can do is just shift the fairing down a little bit until we see the extrusions. And then I can take this and I'll just slide it down until I feel my hand line up with the edge of the extrusion. and then we've got this lined up with a hole. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all the holes lined up, and then we'll talk about putting the bolts on. All right, so now that I've got the holes lined up in here, we can get this fairing mounted on. What we're gonna wanna do is take the smaller bolts from your fairing kit, put the washer through them, and then we're going to do a dab of the Loctite on here, and we're going to get these things nice and snug, because this is what's going to be taking the brunt of the wind on your vehicle. So we want to make sure that this is secured properly in place. So let me do that real quick and I'll get these locked in. All right, so pro level tip of the day. Don't just expect to have the thread locker magically come out without cutting the tip off. So let's do that real quick, and then I'll put the thread locker on here. Just a dab will do you. So scratch that on the washers. If you have the washer on here, you actually can't get the bolt to fit in here or get all the way down in so you can tighten. So no washers on those. All right, so good little tip too, before you tighten in all of these bolts, make sure that you have this nice and flush on the side, so that way you don't tighten it down and have excess overhang on either side, because I'm sure that would create issues when we mount it up on the top of the roof rack. Now that we have the bolts in place, tightened down nice and snug using the thread locker, we're gonna get ready to start installing the stripping right here, that goes around this leading edge of the fairing. So I've looked at this one. The one in the install video came with the 3M tape already pre-installed, but that doesn't look like the case on this, so we might have to do that ourselves. But from what I can see in here, it's got a nice metal frame, so you can bend this pretty easily. So I don't think that this is going to be too much of an issue to get this installed and then put it on. But let's go ahead and get this thing on here. All right, so because the 3M tape wasn't previously installed into the stripping here, what I've had to do is come out and bend this out a little bit, and then I started to feed the 3M down into the centerpiece here. So this part's a little bit annoying. So what you want to do as you're going along is kind of grabbing it and pinching it. So we'll pinch it a little bit, and we just kind of use our index finger here, and we just guide it kind of down into the channel. So I'm going to do this for the rest of this, then we'll put it on here. That was the most fun I never want to have again. I pushed out the edges of this stripping a little bit, was able to feed the 3M in, and now what I'm going to do is go ahead and get ready to start feeding this along the edges. I'm going to use my vice grips here to kind of clamp this back in place. I'm going to use this over it so I don't actually tear it up. But before I clamp it down, I want to go ahead and peel off the 3M backside right here. That way we can go ahead and clamp it down, and we make sure we've got a good solid stick on here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, so not too bad. Got it on there. Like I said, use the vice grips with a cloth and really clamp this down. You'll get a nice good seal on this. But now we're going to take this and get it mounted to the front of the roof rack. We're going to use the front fairing hardware, which would be these longer bolts, and we're going to take the washer, feed it through the sides, so it'll essentially go in like this. All right, so this part is very difficult to do without a friend, so we're gonna get this thing balanced up. I'm gonna get it mounted in, and then we'll take a look at it. All right, so there it is, front fairing installed. This thing's starting to come together. Overall, that part wasn't too bad, but you definitely need somebody to help you balance it on the other side so you can get it up there. Now we're gonna get ready to start installing the extrusions down the middle of the roof rack, and then we'll finish it by putting the rear fairing on. All right, so we have 7 extrusions left, 8 total with the one that we just installed on the front fairing. But this part is pretty straightforward. We're going to line it up with the slots that are on the side of the roof rack, and then we're just going to feed in a bolt from the extrusion mounting kit with a washer for the 3 here to make it nice and secure. Go ahead and get these installed. All right, there they are, all installed. Looks pretty dang good. A lot better than the bread basket that was up here before. One thing I did notice, each of these extrusions had small circular holes cut into the bottom side, which I'm assuming are like drain holes. So make sure when you're putting these in that you have those little circles facing towards the bottom, so these things don't fill up full of water and just sit there and slosh. But otherwise, this is not too bad to get these in. It's just a little tedious and time consuming because there's a lot of parts. To get this rear fairing on here, we're going to install it pretty much the same way we've installed everything else. The combo for the bolts are bolt with flat washer through. Other side, we're going to put the flat washer, crush washer, and then the nut. There are 4 bolts for each side, so you'll need 4 combos of this, but that's it. Let's get this thing on there. Install complete. All right, there it is. The back fairing is installed. This thing looks so nice. If I didn't mention it before, those little cutouts right there are meant for like rear chase lights or takedown lights. I left the panels in there. I'm not exactly sure which ones I want to put back here yet, but when I do, I'll make sure to film that process for you guys. But there it is, all done, installed. Let's go ahead and wrap this video up.
All right, so we finally upgraded the roof rack on the 4Runner, and I've got to say it's my favorite mod so far. This thing looks absolutely killer, and it's really going to suit my needs as we continue to build this rig out. Overall, the installation wasn't too bad, but I try to get you to avoid doing a couple things. One, try not to fall off the roof like I did. We don't need any injuries. Two, if you're taking a TRD Pro roof rack off, that red Loctite is no joke, so be very careful when you're in there trying to get those bolts loose that you don't strip it, because that's going to create a whole nother issue, and you don't want none of that. Number three, try to avoid dropping the cam plate down into the headliner when you're removing it from the roof rack. I didn't do this intentionally. I think it was when I brought the impact out and actually got frustrated and zipped that bolt out of there. I pushed it down and it fell into the headliner, and it became a whole thing. So try to avoid doing that. If I was to answer a question for you guys as to who this roof rack is for, I would say this roof rack is for the folks that are out there trying to do some serious overlanding and carry some serious gear. I bought the DRIFTR series roof rack by Backwoods Adventure Mods because I ultimately plan on putting a rooftop tent on my 4Runner, and I needed a full-length roof rack because I imagine I'm going to need a full-length tent because I've got 3 people plus a 75-pound dog that I got to put in that bad boy, and I need the space. Before we end today's video, I've got a request from you guys. In talking about rooftop tents, I know there's quite a few of you out there that already have some experience. I don't have experience with a rooftop tent, and I'm in the market for one. So if you've got 3-4 people plus a dog that you're trying to fit on your overnights in a rooftop tent, and you've got some recommendations, Danny and I would be greatly appreciative if you could share your experiences with us so we can make a good decision when it comes to purchasing our own rooftop tent. But either way, I know this was a little bit of a longer video, and I greatly appreciate you sticking around all the way to the end. Thank you as always, and we'll see you in the next video.